I learned that lesson after cheating. As always, when I returned from California, I was exhausted when I pulled onto our street around 8 a.m. Sunday morning. To my surprise, Sheila's car was parked in front of the house. Sheila was my wife Lori's best friend, but not someone I approved of. Frankly, Sheila was a cheater, attractive, but a cheater, and I worried that Lori was spending too much time with her. Sheila was divorced because she'd been caught cheating on her husband, and she spent a lot of time in bars and clubs making new friends. The kitchen was empty, and I headed straight upstairs, surprised again to find my wife lying in bed and Sheila sitting next to her. "Hi, baby," Lori said weakly. "How was your trip?" She looked tired and pale. "Are you okay, sweetie?" I asked, coming over to kiss her. "Don't get too close," she said, weakly raising her hand to ward me off. "I've got some horrible flu or something. That's why Sheila's here." Sheila smiled at me, arching her back almost imperceptibly to jut out her large breasts. I always wondered, was this a normal movement of hers, or was she doing it on purpose? "Hi, Todd. Lori and I spent part of the evening at Monroe's, but she started to feel really bad. So I brought her here. Then she seemed to be feverish and threw up a couple times, so I just stayed to make sure she'd be okay until you got back." "Thanks, Sheila. I appreciate it. Do you want some coffee or breakfast or something?" "No, thanks. I had some coffee. Lori just got off the phone with the doctor. He'll be able to see her in about half an hour, and I'll take her there." I started to protest that I would drive myself, but Lori insisted that Sheila could do it. "You need to get some sleep, baby. I know you've been awake for over 24 hours. Mom!" We agreed that I would sleep in the guest room for a couple days so I wouldn't pick up anything from Lori. 10 minutes later, I watched Sheila support Lori as they walked to her car. To my surprise, Sheila drove toward Markham Avenue, even though my wife's doctor was in the other direction. I was too tired to give it much thought, however, and I dove into bed and fell soundly asleep a few minutes later. For the next week, I was a loving, caring husband, but at a distance. According to Lori, Dr. Simon said she probably had some kind of flu, nothing serious, but I should avoid any close contact for at least 5 days or so. So I called the clothing store where Lori worked and told them she would be gone for a few days. I cooked meals for Lori and brought them to her on a tray. I cleaned the kitchen, I did laundry, and I spent evenings with my wife watching TV with her from a chair in the bedroom while she lay in bed. But we never got closer than 10 feet, and by the weekend I was even more horny than usual. We usually averaged sex at least twice a week, and with my trip to California, I'd gone 12 days without any of her sweet lovemaking. By Friday, Lori was up and about, able to shower, dress, and do chores around the house. That evening, I returned home with an armful of roses to be greeted with hugs and kisses from my vivacious wife. I wasted no time in telling her what I wanted for dessert, but to my dismay, she lowered her eyes and said, "I'm so sorry, darling, but my woman days didn't start until this afternoon. Be patient for a few days, okay?" At least we could touch each other, and that weekend we went to the movies, took a couple of long walks, and snuggled in bed every night. By the following Tuesday, I realized that my luck may have turned around for me. I finished work at 4:30 so I could go home and surprise Lori with a nice dinner. Instead, I got a couple surprises myself, a couple phone messages. First, she said, "Hey, babe, sorry for the short notice, but we have to do inventory tonight. A whole truckload of dresses came in mislabeled. I'll probably be here until almost midnight. I'm sorry. Please just grab a sandwich, and I'll see you when I'm done. Also, could you check and see if I left my cell phone on the dresser? I can't find it in my purse. Thank you. Love you." So much for my hopes for a little love. The second message was from the office of Lori's gynecologist, Dr. Mahoney. His secretary had called to remind her of her appointment the next morning to have her stitches removed. What stitches? I considered calling Lori, but her cell phone was right in front of me on the kitchen table. I could have called the store number, but figured she was probably swamped with work at the moment. Still, I was going to ask her about it the first moment she crossed the threshold. After a dinner of leftovers, spiced with 3 beers or so, I watched a little baseball and was in bed with the lights off by 10 p.m. A while later, I awoke to the sound of something sliding across the sheets and then the delightful sensation of a pair of warm lips. To my surprise, the pair of lips did not belong to my wife, but to Sheila. The light startled her, but that didn't stop her from climbing on top of me. She was naked, and those breasts were even more impressive when there was nothing hiding them. "Sheila, what are you doing?" I screamed, pushing her away. I was very horny, but not horny enough to cheat on Lori by letting her friend make love to me. "I've always wanted to have sex with you, Todd," she murmured, using her hand to maintain a cordial relationship with me. "I know Lori is working late and she'll never find out about this. Just let it be just this once." "Are you out of your mind?" I jumped out of bed, ignoring the protests of my body, which was yelling at me, "Come on, what's wrong with that?" "I'm not going to have sex with you, Sheila." "Please, Todd, I'm going to make you feel so good." She chased me across the room and straddled me tightly, rubbing those breasts against my chest. God knows I was tempted, but I had never cheated on Lori and never would. Loyalty was important to both of us. We'd talked about it before we were married, and I knew I could trust her as much as she could trust me. I was angry and very horny, which only made it worse. I pulled away from Sheila, grabbed her hand, and turned her away from me. "Now get dressed, you cheater! You get dressed and get the hell out of here!" Ignoring Sheila's protests, I pushed her into the bathroom, then picked up her clothes and threw them after her. "If you're not dressed in 3 minutes, I'm going to walk you out to your car completely naked." 5 minutes later, I watched Sheila drive away. Shaking my head, I waddled back upstairs to bed. I knew she was stupid, but hitting on my best friend's husband? How did she get in the house? I was about to fall sound asleep again when suddenly the light came on, and I heard Lori yelling at me. "You asshole! Damn you, how could you— Ouch!" Her voice went from furious to completely confused as I rolled over and jumped out of bed. "Lori, what is going on? Why on earth are you yelling at me?" Her face was bright red. She looked shocked and confused. Todd, I'm sorry, I thought you were, She never finished the sentence. I waited, and there was a long silence. Finally, I said, "Darling, is there anything I should know about?" She sat back in her chair, struggling to look at me. "Darling, I waited a little longer. Well, some of the girls at work were saying crazy things, and it occurred to me that maybe you were cheating on me." She looked at me timidly, just to see how I took it. Calmly, I said, "That's the biggest pile of garbage I've ever heard, Lori. You know I would never do that to you. Why tonight? In our bed? I didn't even know until today that you'd be out late tonight. What did you think, that I was going to run down to the nearest bar and pick someone up? Are you out of your mind?" She shook her head, apologizing over and over again. But I wasn't buying it. Finally, I said, Okay. There's something going on here that you don't want to tell me about. I'll just find another place to stay until you're ready to tell me the truth." While she cried and protested, I threw on some clothes, pulled my suitcase out of the closet, and started packing. I didn't have any plans other than finding a motel for a couple days, but there had been enough surprises lately that I didn't want to play dumb hubby anymore. As I headed for the front door, Lori sobbed, "Wait, please, Todd. Okay, I'll do this. Tell you." I turned and said, "That's it, Lori. The whole truth, or I'll leave." She tearfully nodded. We walked to the kitchen and sat down at the table. I thought you'd be tonight in bed with a woman because—" She started crying again. "Because I asked Sheila to come and seduce you." "Why on earth would you do such a ridiculous thing, Lori?" She couldn't look at me. "I can't tell you, Todd. Yeah, I did something terrible. And if I tell you, you'll leave me." Please don't divorce me," she sobbed, I think it might have something to do with the stitches Dr. Mahoney is going to take out tomorrow, I asked dryly. Lori stared at me in utter shock and then burst into tears so convulsive that it was more than 10 minutes before she calmed down enough to speak again. It was all organized by Sheila, not surprisingly, who for months had been convincing Lori to relax, to have a little fun, to go out with her in the evening when I was on one of my business trips. And on Saturday, Lori went with her to Monroe's, where they danced, drank, and ran into a couple of Sheila's good friends. By midnight, 4 of them were back at Sheila's place, completely drunk. They 2 girls and Sheila's buddies, Andy and Martin. Sheila whispered to Lori that Martin had the nicest body she'd ever seen, and he took my wife to an extra bedroom and apparently proved it to her quite vigorously. And then she whispered, and stopped. I was already furious and in no mood to dance around everything else. What is he, a stupid fool? She shrank back. He made me make love to him. He ripped me open. I screamed and started bleeding all over the bed, and he just panicked and got the hell out of there. Sheila came in and saw what happened. She helped me clean up a little and took me home. She stayed all night, and the next morning she took me to Dr. Mahoney, who gave me 8 stitches and antibiotics, and he insisted on testing me for STDs. Thank God, all the tests came back negative. I leaned back in my chair, just looking at the stupid cow I was married to, watching her cringe in misery. Is that it? I asked coldly. She nodded. It was awful, Todd. It was the worst experience of my life. I'm so sorry. She looked at me pleadingly. It was just supposed to be a bit of dancing and flirting. I really don't know how it happened. I pounded my fist on the table, making her jump up. What happened was that you decided to try one more man, you cheater? I wondered for a moment. And that's why you set Sheila up to make love to me in our bed, I take it. So that when you caught me, you'd have a nice little get-out-of-jail-free card for yourself? She nodded without looking up. I sat there thinking, watching her cry. I'd never been so mad at that stupid fool in my life, and almost as mad at Sheila, her so-called friend. I'm out of here, I said, standing up. I'm going to find another place to stay for a few days. No, baby, please, she yelled, following me to the front door. I'll never do it again. Never, I swear. I've learned my lesson. I'm sure you have, Lori. But as to whether you'll ever get the chance never to do it again, that's up to me. And without letting her answer, I slammed the door behind me. What a stupid cheater, was all I could say to myself as I sat in my Best Western hotel room, unable to sleep. 8 years of faithful marriage, and she lets her best friend talk her into having sex with some stranger? My first stop in the morning was supposed to be at my lawyer's office to start the divorce process. No point in wasting time. But then why did I feel so devastated at the thought of it? After about 3 hours of sleep, my first stop of the morning was actually at Sheila's apartment. I pounded on the door until she came out with blurry eyes to open it, and she went completely pale when she saw me. While she hissed at me, I pushed my way into her living room, closed the door behind me, and said, Okay, Sheila, we're going to have a little talk. Lori had been trying to reach me all day, but I had ignored all her calls and emails, so she was no doubt relieved to see my car in the driveway when she got home after work. But she didn't find me in the kitchen or the living room, so she hesitantly walked up the stairs, calling out, Todd, honey, as she entered our bedroom. Hi, Lori, I muttered, not stopping steadily making love to Sheila. Oh, God, Lori exhaled, staring at us. We'll probably finish up here in a few minutes, I said absent-mindedly. You can wait downstairs or stay and watch. It's up to you. And with those words, I turned my full attention back to Sheila. After a couple more minutes, we both finished and went downstairs. Lori disappeared but returned a few minutes later and stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks. Sadly, she said, I guess I can't say, how could you? Can I, Todd? No, Lori, you can't. You and Sheila were planning to make me have sex with her to get you off the hook, and I thought it was the perfect solution to our situation." "Sheila!" exclaimed Lori. "I thought you were my friend." "I'm sorry," Sheila said, trying unsuccessfully to look apologetic. "But if I hadn't dragged you to Monroe, Todd wouldn't be on the verge of divorcing you. He made it clear that was the only way he was ever willing to forgive you. And I don't mind telling you, the last half hour was a sign that I'm going to enjoy the next few weeks." "Weeks?" Lori staggered back and sank heavily into her chair. "What are you talking about?" "It's simple, my dear faithful wife," I said. "You're moving into the guest room. You just had your stitches removed, and I know you won't be available to me for at least a couple weeks. So until then, I'm going to enjoy Sheila. And then we'll be together? You and me, Todd?" I nodded. "As long as you never pull another idiotic stunt like that." "Never, Todd. Never again will I do that. I've learned my lesson. Believe me." "Okay, then," I said, pulling away from Sheila's lips and lifting her up. To my surprise, I noticed that Lori was still sitting there looking at us. She looked very unhappy. "Baby, I know I deserve this, but I don't really deserve it. I mean, how can you just make love to another woman like that?" With a big smile, I said, "Actually, Lori, it's like riding a bicycle. You never forget how to do it." The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.